everyone. Welcome back to Inquirer Live at Gameday Central alongside Jeff McLane. I am Olivia Reiner. We are coming at you live from the press box at Lincoln Financial Field as the Eagles get set for their second preseason game against the Cleveland Browns. Jeff, it's beautiful football weather out there today. Are you ready for the Eagles' second game?
Yeah, second preseason game with a lot of third stringers and fourth stringers playing, so I'm super excited about this. Actually, what I'm most excited about is it's a 1 o'clock start, so I won't
Love a
be up
1
until
o'clock
3 o'clock.
start.
Yeah, so that's
Exactly.
gonna be great.
We're always rooting for earlier start times. And listen, Jalen Hurts isn't playing. The Eagles' offensive starters, the defensive starters, none of those guys are playing. However, there is a lot to watch out for in this game as players continue to vie for roster spots. So we will get into all of that in just a moment. Before we get into it, though, just a reminder for all of you at home, we want you to be a part of our conversation. If you're over on inquire.com/Eagles Game Day, you can leave us a comment or a question down in the chat there. Also, if you're watching on social media, YouTube, Facebook, X, formerly known as Twitter, wherever you are at, if you have a question, again, love to hear from you, and we'll answer some of your questions as we go about our show today. All right, Jeff, let's get right into it. Before we get into anything related to the game, I think we have to discuss the big news this week has been Landon Dickerson sustaining a meniscus injury in his right knee in the Eagles' public practice on Sunday night last week. He has already undergone knee surgery, and the Eagles are optimistic that he can be ready by week 1, which is 19 days from now. Who's counting? You can see he was out there at practice on Thursday handing out some beers to his fellow offensive linemen. Dickerson clearly in good spirits and clearly mobile, which is certainly good news for him, good news for the Eagles. Listen, Landon Dickerson has undergone a ton of knee injuries in the past, including in the NFC Championship game last year, a left knee injury that required offseason surgery. He's a tough guy. He played through that injury in the Super Bowl. Jeff, do you expect Dickerson to be back week 1? Do you feel like that is a realistic timeline for someone like Dickerson who has shown the ability to play through injury in the past?
Well, I guess the optics are that he could be back in time. The fact that he had the surgery on Wednesday morning and was out there on Thursday, just had a knee brace, kind of like a sleeve over his right knee, and walking out there. Looks like his right hand is fine because he was able to crack open a few light beers with Lane Johnson and the Browns. Here we go. There it is, with that Eagles cooler there. So I don't know if they're just he was being paraded out there to suggest that, oh, look how far along he's coming, and yeah, he'll be back by week 1. Realistically, I think it could be I wouldn't say a long shot, but it's probably going to be down to the wire in terms of whether he's ready to play. You wrote a great story about Landon and his toughness the other day. We know that last season he played through the knee thing. He played through a broken wrist pretty much for the entire season, broken bone in his wrist. He's played through a lot of other injuries before. You mentioned knee surgeries. He's had ankle surgeries. He's had everything. And while that may be a greater concern long term, I think short term, even if he makes it back by week 1, can he make it through the entire season? Knowing, Lane and knowing how the knee is, but also knowing how he is prone to injury, and you worry about obviously the legs, the knees, the ankles, everything with him.
Well, if Landon Dickerson is not ready to go for week 1, the Eagles have a number of contingency plans, and the primary one among them right now appears to be Brett Toth, who has been starting at left guard exclusively with the starting offensive line these last 2 practices. We know Brett Toth well because he has been around the Eagles organization for the last several years. However, some fans might not know who he is simply because he hasn't had the opportunity to play a lot. He's a 2019 undrafted free agent out of Army. He is 6'6", 304 pounds, 29 years old. So physically, he's a little bit less imposing than Landon Dickerson. And really, if you think about that pair on the left side of the offensive line, the combination of Landon Dickerson and Jordan Mailata is a pretty formidable sight to see. Toth isn't quite that mauler that Dickerson is, but he's a very versatile player. He has played in 20 games throughout his NFL career, just 224 offensive snaps, but all across the offensive line. 61 at left guard, 30 at center, 27 at right guard, and 102 at right tackle. I am very curious to see how much he plays today, given he played 60% of the snaps last week in the preseason opener against the Cincinnati Bengals. My gut feeling would tell me that there's really no need for him to play nearly that much if the Eagles are trying to get him ready to potentially play in week one if Landon Dickerson isn't ready to go. If it ends up being Toth at left guard week one, Jeff, what is your confidence level, not just in him, but in the entire offensive line, because that unit works together?
Yeah, I'd be shocked if it's Toth in week one, quite frankly. They had him in there whenever Landon was taking a breather here and there before the injury. But look, they tend to do that every now and then early in camp. They're going to keep as much as they can from us. So we got 3 more practices next week that are open to us, and then they start being closed. Besides the early individual portion, maybe we'll see something. They may try and tell us, based upon how they line up, not to report anything. So we'll have a general sense of who could start if Landon isn't ready. But I just don't know. I don't even know if Toth is going to make the roster. He didn't last year, although he had a really good preseason, showed a lot of improvement, added the center responsibilities to his duties to make him a versatile guy that Jeff Stoutland really likes. Maybe it's him. I think more likely something like Matt Pryor goes to right guard and you slide Tyler Steen to left guard, or maybe even Darren Kennard, who's right now technically the backup left guard. I think he has maybe a better chance of making the roster because he doesn't have the. He's not a veteran. Sometimes you can keep those guys off the roster in the first few weeks, so you're not paying their entire salaries for the year. So there's a lot that goes into those roster decisions, and a lot will probably go in. I don't think a lot will go into the starting spot. I mean, obviously they'll play who they think is best there, but they do have to consider those roster decisions in terms of who may end up being at that spot. And then with Steen, he's been playing right guard the entire summer. He's pretty much won the job. But the question there about moving him to left guard, where he's played more and he's probably been a little more comfortable, is like, do you want to do that after you've invested so much time in getting him used to that new starting spot? But Matt Pryor has always played pretty much right guard. He's much more comfortable there, so it may make more sense for him to be there. I think he's pretty much a shorter roster spot. So that's kind of my feeling there. It could end up being Toth. I find that to be unlikely, considering the roster decisions they have to make.
Yeah, we'll see how everything shakes out. I wonder if it is more of a long-term issue with Dickerson, if they end up if they would be more inclined to move Tyler Steen over. I wonder if they would do it in the short term. To me, that doesn't. I don't know if I would want to mess with that in the short term, given he has been practicing all training camp at right guard. But, like I said, the Eagles have some time to make this decision. And, of course, there is the potential that Dickerson could come back in time for week one. So we will continue to report on that and keep an eye on that as the Eagles get ready for their last week of training camp. Can't believe it's the last week next week. Unbelievable. This past week, though, the Eagles had their 2 joint practices against the Cleveland Browns. It did not look like such a great day for the Eagles offense on both days. Jeff, you paid really close attention to the Eagles offense. I was more focused in on the defense. I thought the first day was better for the defense. Second day, they slipped a little bit. I happen to think that Joe Flacco actually made some pretty good plays on the second day, too, for being a 40-year-old quarterback. He certainly still has it. Don't think we're going to see any of him today. It looks like Dylan Gabriel is going to start for the Cleveland Browns. But, Jeff, given the fact that you've seen so many of these joint practices, in the context of what this all means, how much stock do you put in to these practices, given this is like the most action that the Eagles starters are going to play against any other team? They're not, the Jalen Hurtses of the world aren't going to play in these preseason games, and other teams aren't playing a lot of their starters. How meaningful are those joint practices in the context of how the team might perform in the rest of the season?
Well, certainly more meaningful than today. Yeah, right. This is the only opportunity the starters are going to get to face other competition. So it's as intense as it will get before the start of the season. So you had 2 practices to do that. The large majority of snaps went to the starters. The second teamers got a fair amount. The third teamers got virtually none. I think in years past, and this even predates Nick Sirianni, I felt like the joint practices were typically a harbinger of things to come for the Eagles. And the fact that the offense struggled suggested, okay, maybe that's what we could see week one, early in the season. That being said, AJ Brown wasn't out there. Landon Dickerson, as we mentioned, wasn't out there. And then on the last day, Lane Johnson wasn't out there. And what happened there was, with no Lane Johnson and going up against Myles Garrett, who kind of ping pongs back and forth to each side, you didn't have an all-pro tackle on the right side to fend him off half the time, and then you had Jordan Mailata having on the other side, then therefore having to deal with him a bunch. And Garrett's as good as it comes in the NFL. He's a future Hall of Famer, and quite frankly, Mailata could not contain him, and he wrecked practice for the most part. So that was an issue. If you didn't count the sacks and when Jalen kept playing, I guess you could say his numbers were okay. But I think that if you looked at the 2 days, they struggled to throw the ball downfield. They struggled to protect him. There were negative plays, as Nick Sirianni alluded to before the second practice. And it's not just about missing players. If you ask me, it's about the execution. It's about about putting in a new offense with Kevin Petula. So I think they expected there to be some hiccups, and they may say, oh, we're not worried. It's just practice. This is good. We want to get an opportunity to go up against a new defense, a penetrating four-man front that we will, the Jim Schwartz scheme that we'll see in variations against other teams. But I'd be a little concerned. I don't think it's the end of the world, and nor do I think the Eagles certainly think that. But certainly something that I think they need to address prior to season, because this is the last opportunity, as we mentioned, that they'll get to face another team. And then after that, it's just basically going up against the Eagles and preparation for the Cowboys on September 4th.
You think about how last year went when the Eagles had one joint practice against the New England Patriots. They really dominated that day, went on to win the Super Bowl. This year, we will see if there is any correlation between the Eagles' performance in their joint practices with the Browns and the rest of the season, and then ultimately into the playoffs as well. We've got a question over here on YouTube from Bird Gang Pat. They say, who is the player you are most excited to see play today? For them, it is Andrew Makuba. Let's talk a little bit about Makuba. He is expected to make his preseason debut today after missing a good chunk of camp and the preseason opener against the Cleveland Browns with a shoulder injury. He has finally gotten back to practice as a full participant just a week ago. He finally got back in there in team drills. He has had the full week of practice, and he has had some ups and downs. 2 days ago was a big day for them as he got some reps with the first team defense. He gave up a touchdown. However, on the very final play of the day, he had an interception on the 2-point conversion attempt. So again, some ups and downs. Right now for him, this is an important game for him, considering he is vying for that starting safety spot alongside Reed Blankenship. Sidney Brown is in the pole position right now for that gig, and I thought he had a really impressive showing over these last couple of days. He just seemed to be playing with more of an edge and finishing plays with a little bit more physicality than we've seen from him throughout training camp. And I think for him, that is one of his best attributes, is that sense of physicality that he brings to the game. So we're going to be expecting to see both of them out there today. Jeff, in your opinion, given the fact that the Eagles have one more week of training camp, 2 more preseason games until that week 1 opener, is it too late for Makuba to win a starting role?
No, I don't think it's too late. I do think he's running out of time, and I do think the time missed hurt him clearly, especially at that position. There's a lot to know. There's a lot to learn, and just repetition will help young guys in that regard. We've heard Vic Fangio say it over and over again, and meanwhile, Sidney Brown, who we've gone over this a million times, but like last year, because of the knee injury, kind of set him back a little bit in terms of learning the scheme. He's had pretty much the whole entire spring and summer to get ready for that spot. Yet you're right. I think this last practice, going up against another team, maybe allowed him to be a little more physical. He had a nice hit on after a Browns tight end caught a reception near the sideline, knocked him to the ground, maybe a little too forcefully, but nevertheless, that's what Sidney does. And you're a little concerned when it comes to him in the aggressiveness in which he plays, that it could burn him, and teams will feast on that, is my guess, if he is starting. But I think the same applies to Drew Makuba. He's a rookie. He's had some slip-ups at various points. Hasn't quite stood out, but it's really tough sometimes at that position. The Vic Fangio 2 high shells. The safeties are just kind of meant to take away the deep half. And if he's doing that, he's in the right position. The coaches will watch that, and that'll play a part in the assessment of whether he's ready to start. But I think a lot of times, as I mentioned earlier, like these decisions really aren't made with us there. They're made after the open practices happen. Yeah, we can glean what's happening, and I think that with Sydney getting the majority of reps, that tells me where this is going. The other thing I noticed the other day was that Sydney wasn't out there on kickoff return. He was on a side field with Reed Blankenship and Joe Casper, the safeties coach, which suggests that they don't typically he would play kick return. The fact that he's not out there, to me, makes it seem like they're preparing for the inevitability that he'll be the starter. He will be probably a gunner on punt return. He was practicing there the day before, but I'm just looking for signs, and that's one of them.
I think that's an interesting little nugget you picked up on there, Jeff. Now, Makuba isn't the only defensive back set to make his preseason debut today. We are also expecting to see Jacorian Bennett, the cornerback that the Eagles acquired from the Las Vegas Raiders on August 5th, play today. He did not play in the preseason opener last week, as if it was just a few days after the Eagles acquired him. And instantly, as the Eagles traded for him, he kind of was thrust into the conversation to start at outside corner, given his history. He has 11 starts in 2 seasons with the Raiders. However, he saw his season last year cut short due to a shoulder injury, which knocked him out after late November. So he is now kind of in the mix right now. He hasn't taken a ton of reps with the ones. He's mostly been with the second-team defense. However, he did spell Dory Jackson on Thursday for a series with the first-team defense. Based on what you have seen in a very limited window, Jeff, is he a viable option to contend for this role and to potentially win it with the likes of Jackson and Keely Ringo?
He's an option. I don't know how viable he is. I think when the trade happened, everyone viewed it as, because of what we saw in camp so far from Adoree and Keely Ringo, was that, this is a direct result of these guys not getting it done. And maybe there's a little bit of that. I think it's just an opportunity to add some depth to that position. And, a guy who has started in the league, and just kind of throw him into the mix. It's going to take a while. Again, we've talked about the scheme thing, different scheme than he had in Las Vegas. And that was part of the reason why they got rid of him, was because a new regime there under Pete Carroll. He plays a very specific type of defense in terms of that position at cornerback. So the Eagles saw an opportunity to bring in a guy in that has some starts under his belt. I think when he's been out there, you've seen some flashes. The second half of Wednesday's practice did not go so well. There were a lot of catches that happened in his direction. Small guy, not particularly big, should have the agility and the speed to play that position. I still just think that it's probably going to end up being Adoree Jackson or Keely Ringo, or this is my one I think could be surprised too, is at the beginning of the camp, there was so much that was said about whether Cooper DeJean would practice at outside quarterback because they want to get him on the field in base defense. And instead, it was safety. And that's pretty much what we've seen here through the first 3+ weeks of camp. And we haven't seen an outside cornerback. Why? I mean, maybe they've given up on that idea, or maybe they just don't want anyone to know. And then all of a sudden we get to week 1, the lineups are announced, and there is Cooper DeJean, outside cornerback, maybe even at more than base. Who knows? I mean, I've been around long enough to know that sometimes this stuff happens. I don't think that's the best play, and I don't think that's the most likely play. I'm just throwing that out there, so to say, because if Dory and Keely can't get it done, like, you want to have your best 11 on the field, right? And maybe Mac McWilliams, who I think you'll be talking about a little bit, maybe he's the slot, because I like what I've seen out of him at the slot. I like what I've seen out of outside cornerback. But anyway, I was just that was the one thing I just found, and I meant to ask Vic that last week. I will certainly get to ask him that next week. And it could just be Cooper there in base. That's probably going to be like 25% of the snaps, is a significant amount. And then you don't feel as bad with Adoree and Keely Ringo. But I guess that's a transition into Keely.
Yeah,
I'm giving you there.
Well, before we get into Keely too, I just want to mention that Jacorian Bennett was banged up at the end of practice on Thursday. He was out on the field warming up, so it looks like he will be available to play in today's game. So that's good news if there was anyone out there concerned that he would not get on the field. So yes, let us talk about Keely Ringo, because in my mind right now, Jeff, it is crunch time for him. It appears that he is slipping out of the pecking order. In my mind, Keely Ringo, this was his job to lose going into camp, and perhaps that was an unfair characterization for him. He still very much needs to earn the job. However, this is a player that the Eagles have had in their organization for the last few years. He's someone that they invested draft capital in. And in the recent last several days, he has not taken any reps with the first team defense. It has exclusively been, for the most part, especially on Thursday. Wednesday, he took a few reps. He got a couple series with the first team defense. But on Thursday, it was all Adoree Jackson, except for one series with Bennett out there. And I think part of the reason, it's hard for us to say exactly why that was the case. However, he struggled on Wednesday. He gave up a long completion to Jerry Jeudy, and then earlier in practice when he had his one-on-ones, I know Vic Fangio doesn't put a ton of stock in that as he told us. However, he lost both of those repetitions as well. He had a really tough time last week against the Bengals in his first preseason game, gave up 4 receptions for a team-high 79 yards and a touchdown. Most of the damage was done by Jamar Chase, who is obviously, he's clearly one of the top receivers in the league. But, of course, as one of the top cornerbacks on an NFL team, one of the starting cornerbacks, you're going to have to go up against some of the best receivers in the league. When you look at the current situation, given the recent, at least, favoritism towards Adoree Jackson in terms of the starting reps in practice, and then the addition of Jacorian Bennett, do you feel like it is too late for Keely Ringo to earn this job?
No, I don't. That being said, I do agree that what we've seen over the last few weeks suggests that it is slipping out of his grip. Hey, these practices matter. These joint practices matter. The last preseason game matter. We'll see what he does if he gets out there today, what he does. I think they like Ringo because the upside is always there, and you see it at times. It's just he's inconsistent, and then when the low points are there, they're pretty dang low, and they could, as we saw last week. Now that was an unusual call for Vic Fangio in that situation, 0 blitz, and look, you're not going to be strong at every spot on both sides of the ball. In fact, the Eagles probably have the least number of weak spots, quote unquote, of any team in the NFL. But if Ringo's out there, if you don't, if you're not in love with Adoree Jackson, who may just, by process of elimination be the starter, you can cover for him. There's stuff you can scheme up to help these guys. So it's not the end of the world. But, with Ringo, the one thing I don't really understand is it's like he's only a 4th round pick. It just seems like everyone's like kind of deemed him this like heir apparent, or he's they drafted him, therefore he's got to get every opportunity to start. I don't know. I just don't think that that's an imperative for a guy who's been drafted in the 4th round. 1st or 2nd round, yeah. Drew McCuba is eventually probably going to start at some point. We all know Jahad Campbell's going to start at some time. Keely Ringo, if it's not happening, I just don't see the point of forcing a square peg into a round hole.
I think it's the draft capital and also the athletic size profile that excites people a lot. The fact that he is so big and so fast for the position, just hasn't put it all
Alabama,
together.
Georgia,
yeah. The pedigree. I mean, the SEC pedigree is there. Perhaps not the draft pedigree, but there's reason to believe. Bird Gang Pat says it's because he has all the physical traits you'd want in a corner, and I agree with that. I think he does. It's just it hasn't quite all clicked for him yet. And he's running out of time at this point for everything.
Yeah, I don't know if I completely agree with that. I don't know if you want your corners being built like linebackers, but at times, especially now in today's game, the fact that he can defend against the run and make tackles, there's only so often that cornerbacks are called on to do that. You need guys who can cover.
Well, let's flip it over to the other side of the ball. We are not expecting to see any of Tanner McKee today. It is going to be the Dorian Thompson-Robinson, Kyle McCord show. Last week we got to see a little bit of those guys. We saw McKee for a good majority of the game. Thompson-Robinson fared pretty well. We went 5 for 8 for 56 yards. McCord, not so much. 1 for 5 for 8 yards and an interception. Really limited showing for him in particular, but it wasn't a great one, what we saw out there. And then on top of all that, Jeff, we really didn't get to see a whole lot of them in joint practices this week with the Browns. So both of these guys are coming into the game not having taken a ton of reps throughout the week. I'm very interested to see not only how they perform today, but also I'm curious to see if Thompson Robinson continues to sustain the success that he has had throughout training camp, as we talked about on the last show, I think he has been the better quarterback, which is to be understandable. Kyle McCord is a rookie, and he is still very much learning the NFL game and learning the system. But that said, Jeff, do you feel like there is any situation where if Thompson Robinson continues to sustain the success that he has had in these next 2 preseason games, that the Eagles would consider keeping him on the roster this year?
Keeping him and maybe keeping 4 quarterbacks. I mean, that's not out of the realm of possibilities. The way I always viewed it, though, is just like, opportunity to bring a guy in that they liked pre-draft and felt like he could work within this offense. And then maybe, who knows, at some point flip him for something. He'll certainly get an opportunity today to showcase much more than he did in the first preseason game. Sounds like Tanner McKee won't go, and that means Dorian Thompson Robinson will start against his former team. Limited number of reps. We haven't really seen much, so I don't want to go overboard. Who knows? Maybe they could get a 6th rounder before cut downs if he performs well these next 2 weeks. But McCord has certainly struggled, and up against DTR, it's maybe looked worse than it actually is. I mean, they're both running with the same offenses essentially, so it's hard to make excuses for McCord, aside from the fact that he's young and new and learning a scheme, and DTR has been around for a while. But yeah, it wouldn't surprise me. I don't look. They didn't. Like, they want a young developmental quarterback. I just don't think it's too early to give up on McCord. So I just find it hard to believe that he's got the attributes to be a potential backup in the league. I just think it's a little too early to give up on him, and more than likely to end up being him as 3rd quarterback on the roster. I wouldn't, the 4th quarterback thing, just because they're worth so much. Perhaps you got to look what else is going on with the rest of the team and the roster build up, and if you can get away with doing that, and certainly you have the practice squad as well. Although it would be hard to stow a quarterback like DTR there. The team may come in to steal him.
Matt over on YouTube says that they hope that Kyle McCord has a better showing. We'll see how much he's able to play today, but with Tanner McKee not likely to play at all, I would imagine that he'll get a longer look, which will be much better for our evaluation purposes and to give him more of an opportunity to shine. All right, Jeff, let's get into our player picks for today. We've discussed a ton of players in today's show. However, if there's one that you're really interested in keeping an eye on and you're going to have a laser focus on in today's game, who would it be?
Yeah, I had Azeez Ojulari, but I spoke so much earlier that we couldn't get to Darius Cooper. So I'm going to switch it to the wide receiver, the rookie wide receiver, because, I mean, look, he looked great in that first preseason game. I think for a lot of people it was the first opportunity for them to see him. And they were pleasantly surprised. It was the first opportunity for me really to see him against that type of competition. I didn't watch Tarleton State every Saturday the last 4 years, although Devontae Smith did. Did you hear about that story? He said after his first game, and how well he played, Devontae said the next day he had to go watch the film of Cooper at Tarleton State. And so he was just like super
Devontae
impressed at what
Smith
he
thing to say.
Yeah, it is. So I mean, like, that tells you something, right? When one of your star teammates was compelled to go watch your college film because he had never even heard of you based upon what you had done. He's seen it at practice, so I don't know why it took the game maybe for him to get to that point. But nevertheless, I think Cooper's interesting because you can see it in practice that he's starting to get first team reps every now and then, and Jalen Hurts has targeted him on occasion. It seems also like they're trying to figure out, okay, if we get this guy on the 53, what else can he bring? He's got to bring something in terms of special teams. Mm-hmm. So they've had him return kicks. He did in the first preseason game, but I've seen a little more of it in practice. So maybe they think, okay, here's a guy who's a potential kick returner. He's never really done much of it, but I'm interested to see how he performs. He'll be out there clearly as a young guy. He hasn't been guaranteed anything in terms of the roster, so he'll be the guy I'm looking for. And Azeez Ojulari, but that's another story.
All right. Well, Cooper is a good choice, Jeff. I'm going on the other side of the ball with Mac McWilliams. Matt over on YouTube is also looking forward to seeing Mac McWilliams play today. He is a 2025 fifth rounder out of Central Florida. He has more of the size profile to play in the slot, even though he mostly played on the outside throughout his college career. And he began at Eagles training camp playing in the slot. However, in recent practices, the Eagles have been giving him a look on the outside, and he spent the last 2 days of camp and joint practices with the second team defense on the outside, often opposite Jacorian Bennett, which has knocked Eli Ricks down a peg, which is not good for all of the Eli Ricks fans out there. But no, McWilliams has been really solid. He's been solid in coverage both in the slot and on the outside, which is good news for the Eagles as a team right now that is looking for that corner, that starting corner, whoever it may be, and even just depth at the position as well. To me, it would be a little bit of a surprise to see him start there week 1, but I don't think he should be ruled out of the conversation at this point. I think going back to last week, he took most of his reps in the slot in the first preseason game, 17 in the slot and only 9 on the outside. I would be interested to see if he's going to spend some more time on the outside today. I think he will, and could be a good opportunity, a good test for him to show his stuff in the best setting possible that he possibly can going into the season. So he is certainly someone that I will be watching in today's game. All right, Jeff, we had a lot of fun last week with our predictions. You did not do
Tons
so
of
well.
fun. Tons of fun.
I'm just going to put it out there. Will Shipley, 12 touches was your prediction last week. Not quite. 7 carries for 48 yards, 1 catch for 4 yards. So yeah, you weren't too far off.
I was within range.
Within range. All right, well, we'll give you maybe a half point. I don't know. All right, now this is your big chance to redeem yourself. What is your non-score prediction for this week?
Yep. Over under 1, Patrick Johnson, big play. Right? This guy's a preseason darling every year, makes a big play. Last week he had the interception. I think there was wasn't there a play before he got held or something like that? Or something happened. No, I'm forgetting it already.
No, so he had a sack, but it got waved off because I think there was a defensive back who had like an illegal contact.
Yeah, contact downfield or something like that.
But it should have been a sack. Should have been a sack.
All right. I think we're going to see a big play from Patrick Johnson again, and in the larger scheme of things, this is a guy that's on the roster bubble, can get it done as a special teamer. Obviously left for the Giants, and the Eagles brought him back. So who knows? Maybe he makes another play and he sneaks onto the 53.
Yeah, he made the roster out of training camp last year, and then the Eagles ended up cutting him. So who knows? Yeah. Perhaps he's bound for the roster. Last week, let's be honest, I was a little bit more successful than you, Jeff, with my prediction. I
made fun of your pick, too.
200 passing yards. I did, too, and I let you get to my head because I didn't really own it as much as I should have. I said 200 passing yards for Tanner McKee. 252 was what he ended up putting up. So I don't know. I think I've got the better record so far. I'm going to say we're 1-0. I'm 1-0 so far.
You're 1-0.
So yeah, my prediction for this week, I am also keeping it among the pass rushers. I'm going Obo Okoronkwo, a sack for him. This is his former team that he's playing against, just like Dorian Thompson-Robinson. He's come on, I think, over the last couple of weeks. Took him a little bit to get acclimated to Vic Fangio's system. I'm sure he is still very much in the process of that, but I've seen him make some more impressive plays in practice and get into the backfield a bit more. And I think the fact that he's playing against his former team might give him a little bit of extra juice. Eagles need some of their depth pass rushers, as we've talked about, to start to step up behind the Nolan Smiths and the Jalix Hunts. They need some more contributions from the rotation, and there are spots to be won on the 53-man roster, and he's very much in contention for one of them. So I am guessing that we are going to see a little bit more from him today, especially because he didn't play a ton in the preseason opener. All right, everyone, that is going to do it for us. Thank you so much for watching Eagles Game Day Central. Just a reminder, once again, if you're not already over there, head on over to inquire.com/Eagles Game Day. We'll be chatting with you there throughout the game, so we will see you over there.
Yeah, and if you're looking for more Eagles coverage, please check out my podcast, Uncovering the Birds, where I take you behind the scenes each week with exclusive reporting, interviews, and everything you might have missed about your favorite team. New episodes drop weekly at inquire.com/podcasts or wherever you listen to your podcasts.
All right, everyone, enjoy the game wherever you're watching, and thanks once again for tuning in to Game Day Central.